Hey Kipsters, so today we're going to be looking at fractions. We're going to be comparing fractions with different denominators. So remember, we're going to have to change those denominators in order to be able to easily compare those fractions based on their numerators. Let's take a look. Let's review comparing fractions quickly. Remember, if the denominators are the same, then we can compare them right away, and the fraction with the greatest numerator is going to be the greater fraction. But if they don't have the same denominator, then we need to find an equivalent fraction. Remember, when we find an equivalent fraction, we need to find a common denominator for both the unlike denominators. So I start by listing out the multiples of each of my denominators until I find one that's the same. I then create equivalent fractions with my new denominator, and then I can compare my numerators. Don't forget, when making equivalent fractions, whatever I multiply the bottom number by, or the denominator, I have to multiply the top number or numerator by. Our first problem asks us to compare two different sets of fractions. The first one is 4/6 and 5/8, and the second is 7/12 and 4/5. Remember, you're going to have to find common denominators and make equivalent fractions. So when we start to compare 4/6 and 5/8, I know that those denominators are different, so I list out the multiples of 6 and 8, and I find that 24 is a common multiple that I'm going to use as my denominator. So now I have to figure out 6 times what is 24 and 8 times what is 24. I figure out that 6 times 4 is 24, so then I have to multiply the 4 in the numerator also by 4. So I now have an equivalent fraction of 16 24ths. Same with 5/8, 8 times 3 is 24, so 5 times 3 is 15. That tells me that the 4/6 is the greater fraction. 7/12 compared to 4/5. I need to start by finding the multiples of 12 and 5 so I can find that common multiple, which is 60. I'm then going to make those equivalent fractions. Remember, I always multiply the numerator and denominator by the same. Once I've done that, I find that 48/60 is larger. Jackson played a video game for 2/3 hour. Haley played a video game for 3/5 hour. Who played the video game for a greater amount of time? Think about what this question is asking you and what steps you're going to have to take in order to solve this problem. I start with what I know in this problem. Jackson played the video game for 2/3 hour. Haley played the video game for 3/5 hour. I need to figure out who played it for a greater amount of time, but the denominators are different. So I start by listing the multiples of each of my denominators. I find that 15 is a common multiple of 3 and 5. So I make an equivalent fraction with 15ths. 2/3 has an equivalent fraction of 10/15, and 3/5 has an equivalent fraction of 9/15. I then determine that 10/15 is greater than 9/15 because it has a larger numerator. So that means that Jackson played the video game for a greater amount of time. Kipsters, I just want to say how proud I am of how hard you've worked during this time when our school year didn't end the way we wanted it to, but you kept up the work and you did what needed to be done. Way to go!